there's that famous poem by that Catholic priest. Sorry? I think first they came for the communists, but I wasn't a communist, so I didn't say anything. And they came for the trade unionists, but I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't say anything. And they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. By the time they came for me, there was no one left to stand up for me. So there has to be a line written in the sand somewhere. Now, it could be you guys, it could be somebody else. I'll tell you what happened at UBC. So we were just one local amongst three, and to avoid the legislated disagreement, we agreed that we would propose to the government. We visited the Minister of Labour and said, well, it's either send it to binding arbitration or there will be a public sector general strike. Our local didn't actually agree with that, but we went along with it because it was one amongst three, and also we didn't actually think that the government would go for it. And by the things started getting to a sort of general strike basis, then the actual equation of the game would significantly change. But amazingly, they blinked. And this was the first time the Campbell government had ever acceded to the demands of any group of workers. And we'd made them blink. And at the same time, I didn't make this clear earlier, but they were instituting a public sector wage freeze for every public sector employee. And what we ended up getting at the beginning of bargaining, they were saying, no, wage freeze, you're all public sector employees, 0, 0, 0. We ended up getting 11.5% over 3 years. Unfortunately, this is why you guys are right to oppose back to binding arbitration. The other two locals, they got the wage freeze and they got their anti-contracting out language removed. Yeah. So we did well, but, well, we didn't do well. We didn't get anything on tuition, but we got it on cash because we were out there and militant. But this started off a movement. This was March of 2003. If anybody has sort of watched the news over recent history of British Columbia, in November of 2003, the ferry workers struck illegally, defying back-to-work legislation. And ferries are very important in British Columbia. You can't get from Vancouver to Victoria without the ferries. And obviously a much more important sector of the labour movement than just a bunch of grad students. But they only could do that because they knew that it had been done before. And then after that, May the following year, the hospital employees, the nurses and hospital workers, they struck illegally, and it almost ended in a general strike. And then the following year, the teachers struck, which also almost ended in a general strike. And this government that was on a basis of putting the boot to organised workers, come 2006, realised it's had too many bloody noses, and it backed off. And there hasn't been any back-to-work legislation tabled in British Columbia since 2005. And the contracts settled with the public sector in 2006 were quite good ones in terms of money. That they bought class peace because they were afraid of what it was doing to their government. And so I take a certain degree of pride that we started up that movement. And we not that Gordon Campbell can ever be trusted, to not do it again. But, it's a political struggle. This is no longer an economic struggle. This is a broader political struggle. And you, as one local, you can't defeat the capitalist state. I'm sorry to tell you. As one local. However... yeah.
With 3903.
Yes. However, you can start a movement. You can start a movement. And if not you, then who? If not now, then when? So there are options. And at the time, yes, we went on a legal strike. We never got one fine. At the time, I wasn't even Canadian, so potentially not only was the executive risking arrest and imprisonment, I was actually risking deportation. Didn't matter. It didn't matter, because if it's big enough, because we understood that if they dared enforce any of that, they would be facing the mother of all movements from every section of organised labour, and not just there. And we also have the advantage of, looking around the room. We're not your traditional trade unionists. We're not the grizzled old white guy with grease under his nails. We have the advantage of being sort of young, kind of attractive, and erudite. So you can go and say, look, please don't screw me over any more than you already are. And people will not want to completely bankrupt sort of grad students who are already in poverty. People knew that this was the line in the sand, and people came out because this was the fight. This was the battle line. So everybody who cared about this issue came. And you've got to get the labour movement know that this is the line in the sand. Because one thing that I remember Barry O'Neill, president of CUPE UBC, said to me is like, nobody's going to come out in solidarity with you unless you're willing to go out in solidarity for yourself. And so there are no guarantees in this. But if you move, I can guarantee you, politically guarantee you, there are hundreds of thousands of organised workers who are looking for a line in the sand and looking to come out. But they've got to know that you are prepared to fight. So if you are prepared to fight, they will be there. The reports, initially it was in the campus press, and then it was in the kind of B section of the newspapers, and so we either had OK press or impartial press, relatively impartial. As soon as we got to the A section, that's where it started becoming important, and the knives come out. There's a reason why the richest men in the country own the newspapers. The fact is, the public opinion has got nothing to do with why you were legislated back. You were legislated back because you were winning, and they couldn't have your win. And that's not an opinion, that is actually knowledge. We did a Freedom of Information request a few months after the strike to look at communications between UBC and the government. And there was a long letter from Martha Piper to the government detailing how we were winning right down the line, and they were about a week away from caving to us, and that they had to be bailed out by the government. And it's kind of looked at this document with a combination of pride and anger. It's like, because we were capable of beating the university, and you guys are capable of defeating the university. Absolutely. But unfortunately, on your own, no, you cannot defeat the government. But what you can do is help start a movement that can defeat the government. And in terms of various actions, it's your choice, it's your union. Various unions that have gone on a legal strike. There's been mass resignations, has been an option. Another option is to have volunteers to put themselves forward, to take a legal action and then refuse to pay fines and then be imprisoned, act as a focal point for the movement and the solidarity, force them to take it to the courts. You can't demand that of everybody, but some people will be prepared to take that action. There are options. Don't let anybody tell you there is no alternative, because there are many alternatives.